Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, England's biggest agri-environment scheme will be relaunched next year. More on that later. First, though, a rather different sort of farm in a prison. The prison service used to run a network of farms, producing food for and offering work to the inmates. Just a handful remain, including at the women's prison, East Sutton Park in Kent. It has its own farm with pigs, cattle and sheep. The women there learn how to look after livestock, drive tractors and do other farm work. They supply the prison kitchens with the food they produce and learn skills that help them find work when they leave jail. Well, I went to the Category D prison, which means it's an open prison, and met two prisoners, let's call them Alice and Lisa, who help run the farm.
We sort the pigs out, we feed them, we muck them out, make sure they're comfortable, they're happy, they're healthy.
Do you like working with the pigs? Because they can be, sows are very big and very protective of their piglets. How does that go?
I love it. I think you have to respect them as mothers, firstly, and they act as any woman would. If someone was coming in we have tools, we are often wearing waterproofs, we are imposing, so you respect them and they give you that back. So I feel privileged to work here because everyone wants to work on the farm.
Also with us is another of the people who volunteers to work here on the farm, who we're going to call Lisa.
I love the outdoors, I love the animals, I love being close to nature. It's really amazing and we're a good team here.
As we're talking, one of the pigs has come out to say hello. Who's this?
Petunia.
You're kidding me.
Petunia.
She's lovely. She's honestly one of the most friendly pigs.
Alice is just leaning over and scratching her ears. Petunia? Where did
Petunia.
that come from?
A lot of them are named after the officers, I believe.
Crikey. We'll just leave that there, shall we? So which animals do you like working with the best?
The pigs.
Really?
Yeah.
What about sheep?
The sheep are okay, yeah, they're lovely, they're beautiful, but the pigs, I think, are the business.
And you can hear more from East Sutton Park Prison Farm on Your Farm. That's this Sunday morning at 6:30 here on BBC Radio 4. Now, all week we've been talking about farming around the world because of the climate talks COP30, which end today in Brazil. They dedicated 2 days to agriculture, which, as we've discussed, is seen as offering both problems and solutions as we try to mitigate the changing climate. So what's been decided? BBC climate and science reporter Esme Stallard has been covering the talks.
What we've seen at this year's COPs is a lot more sort of what we call bilateral agreements. One that came out this year was France sort of announced they were aiming to raise $2.5 billion, particularly for the Congo Basin, because of the levels of deforestation that have been happening there, particularly from regional agriculture. And the reason they care so much about that is because deforestation, particularly in the Congo Basin, we're starting to see is affecting the weather flows within that region. And we've seen quite a lot of effects on particularly cacao crop, but other types of crop, which obviously play into the sort of bigger global agricultural system. So that was something that France has been leading on, as well as kind of getting new funding announcements. We also had more data, I guess, to sort of explore why new funding is needed. So on Friday, the Food and Agriculture Organization, which is the UN body that looks at this, announced a new report looking into the impact of disasters on agriculture. And they said that they've estimated that since 1991, we've lost about 4.6 billion tonnes of cereal. And in total, it's costing about $99 billion a year. So that kind of new data is often timed to be released at COP to sort of, I guess, give impetus to countries to think about putting their hands in their pockets, if you like.
One of the things that everybody sort of agrees on is we need to farm sustainably. One of the things that people can't agree on is what that actually means. Has progress been made on getting agreement on that in Brazil? Yeah,
exactly. And I think a key part of that is trying to share knowledge on that, to actually trying to compare on the ground projects that are happening across different types of ecosystem, different countries, different weather patterns. So something that has been announced as part of these kind of agriculture days is this new FAST initiative, which is a number of countries have signed up to this, where they're agreeing to share share experiences in terms of some pilot projects they're doing, share data, and also to try and harmonise regulation. And this makes it a lot easier if we're thinking in terms of trading on food products as well, is to demonstrate, okay, if, for example, we want to reduce this particular type of pesticide that we're using, trying to have more countries having that same regulation across their country so that when you're trading, there's more consistency.
So lots of talking then about agriculture. What will actually come from this COP in terms of action on farming?
Well, I think there's sort of more specific things that have kind of fallen out of this. An example of sort of a bilateral agreement that's been announced is this one between the UK and also Brazil itself, which is called the Belém Declaration on Fertiliser. Both those countries have said they want to accelerate nutrient use efficiency, so making sure that nutrients are being used in the most efficient way with on farmland, but also cut emissions. So what does that actually look like? Well, what they want to do is trying to align certification and regulation across those two countries. It's also hoped that obviously this will sort of streamline trade. And the other thing with that is trying to, what they've said is sort of build market demand in quotation marks. And I think part of that is new finance facilities for farmers across both sets of countries as well. And also trying to kind of mobilise what they're calling kind of innovative types of funding. So farmers are able to access finance a lot quicker when they're performing well, or for example, in terms of insurance models. So if they're hit by extreme weather, trying to get funding payments out a lot quicker. So there has been lots of different things going on, and it can often feel like a bit of a talking shop, but we're certainly starting to see examples come to the fore, and I think a lot more cooperation is certainly the front that Brazil is trying to present to the world that this COP has achieved.
Esme Stallard there. Well, details on the relaunch of England's biggest agri-environment scheme will come in the first half of next year. So says the Secretary of State for the Environment, Emma Reynolds, who was speaking at the Country Land and Business Association's annual conference. As you may remember, this scheme, the Sustainable Farming Incentive, or SFI, pays farmers for things like planting hedges and improving soils. It was suddenly closed to new applicants in March as it had run out of money. Details on what happens next were supposed to be announced in the summer. As we've reported, some farmers now say they've lost confidence in the system. Emma Reynolds told the conference that it's complicated and they want to get it right.
Over the course of this year, the team have worked closely with the CLA and other stakeholders to consider improvements which build on what has been working well in SFI, and also, obviously, to address what hasn't worked so well.
Just before she spoke, England's farm business income figures for the last financial year were released. All types of farms, with the exception of horticulture and pig farming, saw a year-on-year increase. Though remember that in 2023-24, farm incomes dropped considerably. The government payments to farmers in agri-environment schemes now make up an average of 30% of farm income, and many farms continue to lose money on the farming sides of their businesses. Ms Reynolds said making farming pay remained a priority, and that the government will publish and respond to the profitability review, led by the former NFU president Minette Batters, soon. The new CLA president, Gavin Lane, welcomed her comments, but told me farming needs less change.
I think there was a recognition of some of the issues and challenges that our members face. There was a recognition of the need for some stability, which we haven't seen for a while, and the need to try and focus in on that stability to drive growth and investment for the countryside.
Although there were a lot of things that you talked about in your speech which opened this conference, which were not mentioned in hers. Things like, for instance, inheritance tax.
I couldn't imagine that she was going to say anything about inheritance tax. Ultimately, that's Treasury decision, and we know from the rural Labour MPs that we've spoken to that there isn't any movement there. We can't see any movement there. So was it worth mentioning? Probably not, really, in that context. I really want to stay on the positives because we really need some of that happening very, very soon.
We have had some positive news on farm incomes, which are generally up, although that has revealed a big reliance on agri-environment schemes. The Secretary of State talked about the relaunch of SFI in the first half of next year. What did you make of that? Because we were expecting details on that in the summer.
Yeah, it's not great. I think where we're at is actually this harvest, which obviously wouldn't have been in the figures, is particularly bad. I know in the east the yields are appalling. We've seen record prices for feed and for straw. It is proving really, really difficult as people go into the winter. And obviously with the removal of BPS or down to very, very small amounts, it's really, really vital that those people that didn't get into SFI get into SFI as quickly as possible, especially if they haven't been in a countryside stewardship scheme.
You've just taken over as president of the CLA. Do you feel that you're taking over at a tricky time?
Yes. I don't think any of us envisaged this. I mean, the change in politics in the last 5 years, let alone, the last 6 months, there's been so much movement and so much, I'm not going to say chaos, but it feels very, very difficult to plan in such a tricky political climate. But hopefully we get some stability.
CLA President Gavin Lane. The Environment Secretary didn't want to talk to us or other media after her speech, but along with a select few from the farming press, I was invited to Defra to talk to the Farming Minister, Angela Eagle. A few weeks ago on this programme, she ruled out any changes to the reimposition from April of inheritance tax on farming assets over £1 million. Following the mass lobbying of Parliament by farmers over IHT earlier this week, and with another demonstration planned in London next week, she was asked how the government can rebuild trust with the farming sector.
Well, we need to create a direction of travel for farming, and we've also got to talk about stability and clarity, which is what the Secretary of State was talking about earlier at the conference. But we're also talking about partnership working and how we can make farming profitable and sustainable. The Secretary of State talked about the Batters Review, which will be published before Christmas. We've in the middle of doing a farming pathway, which is a 25-year strategy of directions. We've also got the land use framework. It all goes together to form a kind of whole. And so we'll be announcing most of those things in the early parts of next year. So hopefully we can begin to build a plan.
Farming income figures out today reveal that agri-environment figures on average make up 30% of farm incomes. They're really important. Yeah. We were expecting details on the new SFI in the summer. It's now November. The Secretary of State says in the first half of next year. This is getting silly.
Well, I think we need to get it right. And we've had the reshuffle, so that means you've got to have a look from scratch at what's going on. So we know how important this is. But I'm taking a little bit of time so that I can have a look at a range of issues, see what's worked well, see what hasn't, see how we can make best use of the money. There will be clarity and certainty in time for the schemes to be opened. There's also a delivery issue with the tech that we have as well. So it's a question of getting that sequence right so that we can move forward with the next iteration of SFI in a way that I hope will be more transparent and sustainable.
You've got all these things that you're talking about. The one thing you're not talking about, of course, is the elephant in the room, which is inheritance tax. I was with a group of farmers last week who were really up, they say, for growth. But they will say at the moment they're not spending money investing in their businesses. They don't want to make them worth any more money. Or they're paying out lots of money for professional advice on how to manage succession. What would you say to them?
The inheritance tax announcements were made in the budget last year, and I know how much angst that has generated in the farming community. I think we have to look forwards. I was very clear about what the situation was when I was asked on your programme a few weeks ago. And what we've got to do is look at what we can do on sustainability and profitability to build farming markets, potential for export abroad, a range of things on developments on agri-tech, what we can do to make the whole approach work together more. And I understand what people's views about IHT are, but we are where we are on that one, and we've got to look forward.
The Farming Minister, Angela Eagle. That's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Rebecca Rooney, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.